watching Rogers TV, Corner Brook.
The following program is brought to you by Rogers Anyplace TV. Enjoy exclusive content for free. Visit RogersAnyplaceTV.com.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the federal election debate on the environment for the rotting of long-range mountains. My name is Glenn Keeling. I'm chair of the Western Environment Center. I'm going to be your moderator for this evening. We appreciate everybody for coming, as well as to Rogers for live streaming, so all of our viewers and the other media as well. Before going any further, we acknowledge that the lands on which Memorial University's campuses are situated are territories of diverse Indigenous groups, and we acknowledge the diverse histories and cultures of the Biak, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. This debate of the nationally coordinated 100 debates on the environment. Over 100 debates are happening right across the country today, including 2 others in the province. All of these debates are strictly non-partisan and politically neutral. The Western Environment Center with the Environmental Policy Institute are the local organizers of the debate. The Western Environment Center is a local nonprofit. Our mandate is environmental education with a focus on food sustainability and climate change. We also do many hands-on projects. To find out to get involved, you can visit wecnl.ca. And our partner here on campus, the Environmental Policy Institute, has a mandate covering research, teaching, and public engagement activities, including, for example, its Master of Arts in Environmental Policy and its Environmental Policy Innovation Labs. And we're joined today by Dr. Garrett Richards, who is our timekeeper sitting in the front. Briefly introduce the candidates here tonight. We did invite 4 candidates, provided all candidates who are unable to attend in person an opportunity to remotely. So we're very happy to welcome Holly Pike now with the Green Party, and we appreciate them coming out. We're going to ask, in the interest of timekeeping, the audience withhold all your applause until the end. We'd also take a moment right now to make sure that your cell phones are turned off and on silent for the evening. And, of course, keep anything and all that kind of thing to a minimum. Seating order and the question order tonight has been selected before the event, and are already aware of that. We're going to be asking 8 questions. The first of those 4 questions are mandated by national coordinators and are being asked right across the country. The other 4 questions have been submitted in advance by members of the general public, so we appreciate everybody's involvement in that regard. We'll start on with the introductory statements and begin from there right into the question. The most interesting part of the night, I think, is going to be the wild card. Giving each candidate 2 wild cards for rebuttals. So they're able to use those at any time, and that'll provide them an additional 2 minutes on that question to rebut the other candidate or perhaps add something. So without any further delay, we're going to go into the introductory statements, and we're going to be with Lucas with his first 3 minutes.
Beautiful. Sitting here.
You can do whatever you like, sir.
Okay. So good evening. I will admit this is the first debate I've ever been in. A little racking anyways. Thank you to the Western Environmental Center, Environmental Policy Institute, and everybody for coming out. It's great to see so many faces and so many other people online. As mentioned, my name is Bill. I'm running for the Green Party in the federal election upcoming on October 21st. A resident of Mount Moriah, and I'm currently completing my Master's of Science in Boards and Agriculture here at the university. Before the truck driver, operations manager, and some other general labor jobs. You may be asking why I'm running for politics. I ask myself that question every day as well. The main reason is actually quite evident here tonight. A conservative, we don't see a liberal. It's time that we start doing policy. However, how can we expect someone to show up and voice our concerns in the House of Commons can't show up to the one and only debate being held in our riding? And so that's why I'm here tonight, to get rid of those old party lines. You know, rather than voting for a color or a party, we want someone to represent. Now, I'll admit, I haven't always voted for the Green. This is something new for me, but here I am representing them. In one word, the real reason is sustainability. The Green Party platform has been created around the 17 United Nations Sustainable Goals to create peace and prosperity for people and the planet. There are many ways of achieving these goals, but it's important that we do it all as a country. The as I'm sure some of you have heard, includes free pharmacare, care for low-income earners, things like free tuition, guaranteed livable income, and moving to a green economy. Now, none of this can be done with Indigenous peoples. As a country, we must implement Indigenous Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, as well as the calls to act Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and inquiry in murdered Indigenous women and girls. Now, for you may be wondering why I have yet to mention climate change. What I've mentioned so far indirectly plays a role in our solution to that. We must reduce our greenhouse gas emissions 60% from 2005 levels by 2030 and grow by 2050. How are we going to do this in a pride to oil and gas? As the rest of the world moves away from gas, we can either bury our head in the sand and continue on our same path, or we can be at the forefront of a just transition to a sustainable economy. Instead of sending our husbands, wives, sons, and daughters offshore, let us keep them here in our riding. Let's transition them to the jobs, energy, and resources. Newfoundland and Labrador has always been tied to the lands and the forests. We need to make this possible for generations to come.
Thank you, Lucas. We'll be going to Holly next.
Good evening. My name is Holly Pike. I'm the ND candidate in Long Range Mountains. I want to, as Lucas did, thank everyone for being here and thank the Environmental Policy and the Western Environment Centre for organizing this event. I've been politically active for about 35 years, be passionate about equality and fairness. I've been a member of the Women Council for the last several years, maybe closer to 10. I also worked with other community groups. For instance, I've served on the past. I was part of the committee that brought the first Syrian referendum in 2015. To me, I work with groups that try to ensure that everyone has the freedoms needed to fully participate in work, in society, education, in political life, in whatever is important to what they are. Our laws speak of equal rights. Real equality requires more than a statement of principle. I think we still have a lot to do to truly guarantee equality and equal opportunities for all Canadians. And that's why I've with the New Democratic Party for so long. As a member of the executive, as a candidate, this isn't my first time, Lucas, and working for other candidates on campaigns. The CP platform is based on fairness for working Canadians. And the changes that need to be made now by changing the tax so that higher earners and corporations pay more. We'll increase the top marginal tax rate, $210,000 a year, to 35% tax, back to the 2010 level of 18%. Then tax on those with wealth over 20 million, rate billions of dollars annually, according to the Parliament. Along with other methods of taxing the wealthiest Canadians' pursuit of tax evaders who hide money offshore, this will generate the money we need to meet our greenhouse gas, to protect the environment and remediate environment, to develop strong support systems for folks whose jobs are change, or as we switch to greener technology, healthcare for equitable access to the labor market, to revisit so more workers can access it no matter what kind of work they do, provide universal pharmacare so Canadians don't have to jeopardize getting the drugs that they need. Whether in government, we will fight for these changes as we recognize the dealing with the climate crisis and of supporting Canadians through what a significant change as we develop a more environment safer and cleaner economy and lifestyle. Thanks.
Now we're going to get those wild cards into play potentially, where the candidates may raise those and be given an additional 2 minutes of speaking time. So the first question, which will be going to Holly, is concerning water. Canada is home to roughly half the world's lakes, an equivalent volume of the world's fresh water, and roughly 1/4 of the world's wetlands. Canadians are witnessing the impact that industrial development and climate change are having on our water. The Insurance Bureau of Canada has noted that climate change, as well as the historic loss of wetlands to industrial development, has led to a 250% increase in flooding over the past 2 decades, as well as a reduction in water quality and wildlife habitat. So the question to the candidates is, what can the federal government do to work with different actors, such as municipalities, to reduce both water pollution and the risk of floods, which have been aggravated by industrial development and climate change? And again, the first question is to Holly.
Thank you. There's actually a lot more that the federal government could be doing to protect our water and to mitigate our risk of flooding. Our communities are already feeling the impacts of climate change emergency. Flooding and windstorms are becoming more common, and that's why the NDP has planned to expand federal funding by an additional $2.5 billion to respond to disasters, as well as working with communities to proactively adapt their infrastructure to withstand extreme weather events. We'll sit down with the provinces, the territories, and local governments to ensure that the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund meets the needs of communities and the people who rely on that fund after a disaster. And we plan to create a national freshwater strategy, working with the provinces and territories again to protect waterways and to strengthen the navigable water protections. We'll also, as a first step in so many things, ban single-use plastics. Less than 10% of the plastic in Canada is recycled. So all that waste hangs around, it blows around, it leaches dangerous chemicals into our systems. It breaks down into microplastics, which end up in our food and in our water. And our work in reducing emissions from shipping and fishing as part of our climate strategy will help protect the water as well, as we'll work with farmers to promote land management techniques and methods that increase carbon sequestration and reduce emissions and reduce runoff. We plan to invest in agricultural science to support these efforts. All of this requires working with all levels of government, working with industry, and with Canadians who work in the relevant industries or Canadians who have been affected by the changes to our waters already.
Beautiful. Lovely. So as a Green Party candidate, there's a few things that we would do differently. We must treat safe drinking water as a right. In order to do this, we need more collaboration, as Glenn said. The Green Party proposes to create a Council of Canadian Governments, including federal, provincial, municipal, local, and Indigenous governments, to discuss issues like this brought up. We must develop a national water strategy to ensure safe drinking water. There was one created in the 1980s that hasn't fully yet been implemented. The Green Party proposes protecting a minimum of 30% of fresh water and land by 2030, to ensure safe drinking water. We must invest in climate-proof drinking water and wastewater systems to protect against these flooding, but also droughts and other contamination. Another way to protect against floods is to establish a national program to restore buffer zones around these waterways to reduce this leaching and other such contamination. Lastly, we should be providing support to farmers to protect wildlife habitat areas, water quality, and soil erosion on their lands. These types of policies are what's going to protect our waters and the risks of flooding. Thank you.
Thank you. Much appreciated our candidates staying on time as well. The next of our preset questions deals with wilderness conservation. This one will be going to Lucas first. When Canadians are asked what they love most about our country, they point to the natural beauty, wildlife, and spectacular wilderness areas. Yet, Canada is falling below its international commitments to protect these spaces, and our parks and other protected areas are not funded at the level needed to conserve the diverse plants and animals that live there. A recent study shows that 50% of Canadian wildlife species are in decline. What will you do to protect the quality and quantity of wilderness in Canada?
I would argue that we have some of the best wilderness in the world here in the long-range mountain riding, and we need to protect it for generations to come. We must use evidence-based policy when making decisions on issues like these. One of the Green Party of Canada's core values is ecological wisdom, and the idea that humans and all species of plants and animals are integral and interdependent parts of a living planet. Thus, degrading one part damages life as a whole. This is both an ethical and a practical issue. We must work with Indigenous peoples and traditional ecological wisdom. Policy-wise, we must increase funding to federal departments for endangered species protection, as well as providing $100 million a year for 4 years for Indigenous-led protected and conserved areas. We must fully restore the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act to its pre-Harper era strength, as well as increase funding to Parks Canada to protect the ecological integrity. Building on all of that, we must create a national forest strategy to save our forests as carbon sinks. In our riding, we rely on the oceans to give us fish, the forests to give us trees, and the land to give us berries. Not to mention the economic benefit of all of those. In order to protect those, we need to conserve our wilderness.
Okay. Thank you, Lucas, and we'll go to you, Holly, for your 3 minutes on wilderness conservation.
All right, thank you. We all know that we need to act now to preserve and to begin restoring our natural habitats and wildlife before it's too late. The world's biodiversity is declining at alarming rates because of climate change and the destruction of natural habitats. Canada is particularly seen as a country of natural beauty and wilderness, and we need to protect not that image, but the reality of that. One of the most important things we can do is to protect more of our land, waters, and oceans so that our natural habitats and wildlife can begin to heal. The NDP is committed to protecting at least 30% of our land, fresh waters, and oceans by 2030, backing that commitment with funding and enforcement. Right now, only about 10% of our land is being actively conserved. There are also other proactive measures that the federal government can take to protect our biodiversity. We can work with other levels of government to develop a system of urban national parks to support conservation and preserve our natural heritage. We can develop a national approach to tree planting using responsible reforestation to help lower our carbon footprint. We can support the creation of Indigenous managed protected areas to make sure that species recovery efforts uphold Indigenous rights and embrace traditional knowledge to increase biodiversity. We can expand marine protected areas to protect ocean biodiversity. We can fight back against invasive species. And we can protect biodiversity by using all the federal tools available under the Species at Risk Act and ensure the implementation of recovery recovery strategies under that act using the Habitat Stewardship Program and conservation agreements, the opportunity for punishments under that act. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next question deals with pollution and toxic substances. In recent decades, Canada has made big strides to improve the health of Canadians and our environment by regulating toxic substances. Legal limits on lead in gasoline, restricting chemicals like DDT, and the phase-out of coal-fired electricity have had an enormous positive impact. However, air pollution is still the leading environmental cause of death and illness in Canada. We are the only Western nation without legally binding national air pollution standards. We have also not kept pace with emerging threats from newer toxic substances, often from everyday consumer products. Many of these products have demonstrated links to cancer and many other health effects. Our overarching toxic law, the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, has not been significantly strengthened in 20 years. What will you do to ensure that Canadians are better protected from the health and environmental impacts of toxic substances? And we're going to you first, Holly.
Thanks. It's extremely important to protect Canadians from harmful substances. As Glenn mentioned, the Environmental Protection Act it's been reviewed every 5 years. It's not actually been updated since 1999. So major change is long overdue, and that's one of the things that the NDP is committed to. We'll also enshrine in law the right to a healthy environment to ensure all communities can enjoy a guarantee of clean water, land, and air by putting in place a federal Environmental Bill of Rights, which is something that an NDP and MP, Linda Duncan, has been trying to do for the last 11 or 12 years at least, as a private member's bill. We need to pay specific attention to the Environmental Protection Act, in the Act, to just what sustainable development means, and make sure that trade and manufacturing demands don't override environmental protection. We also need to make sure that the engagement of Indigenous peoples and other levels of government in environmental protection is meaningful, so that we get the best information available from those most affected by specific environmental concerns, as well as the best scientific information available. We need to be able to protect traditional and current uses of and access to the land. And to do that, we need stringent regulations to prevent the emission of toxins, especially as the long-term effects of any substance are difficult, if not impossible, to predict, and as their bioaccumulation and their action may be affected by factors that are not even manifest yet. We don't even know what might cause further changes. And the same applies to the Pest Control Products Act. We need to access the best information available and make decisions based on what is best for the Canadian environment and Canadian conditions, which vary considerably across the country, and not rely solely on information that's provided by producers and by outside agents. Thanks.
Well said.
Thank you, Lucas. You can go ahead.
Yeah, so we must protect the right to a healthy environment for all Canadians. The Green Party is committed to strengthening the Canadian Environmental Assessment. What was part of the question? Strengthening.
We're referring to the Canadian Environmental Protection Act in particular.
Act, that's the word I wanted. Which should include a limit on the approval and use of toxic chemicals that affect the health and environment, as well as regulate microfibers as a toxic substance. The Green Party is committed to putting into legislation the right to a healthy environment, including public participation rights, transparency in decision-making, and wider access to judicial reviews in courts. As we know, another area of toxic substances is pesticides. We must improve the monitoring, including that of the health impacts of pesticides being used, reduce the use of pesticides in agriculture, and support farmers in a transition away from pesticides. The Green Party plans to ban forestry and cosmetic use of glyphosate-based herbicides as well. All of these are things that the Green Party would do to ensure that Canadians are better protected.
Thank you. We'll be moving on to the final question, which has been preset by the National Organizing Committee. And of course, we'll remind our candidates as well, the audience, of the existence of those wild cards out there if you feel the need to rebut anything your colleague has said there. So this question is in regards to climate change. Around the world, we are seeing inspiring examples of leadership to reduce greenhouse gases and accelerate the shift to a green economy. At the same time, we are seeing a ramp up of the effects of climate change, and the scientific consensus is that we have a little more than a decade to turn things around. We see extreme weather events across the country, including wildfires, flooding, and droughts. Per person, Canadians produce the most greenhouse gas pollution of all G20 nations. What are the key elements of an action plan that you will advocate for to ensure Canada meets its international obligations to reduce greenhouse gas pollution? And Lucas, you'll be going first on this one.
Thanks. The impacts of climate change are quite evident, whether it be the news last week of water temperatures rising and killing a bunch of fish, whether it be the climate strike here in Corner Brook, or the climate strike a week before that in Stephenville. Although there wasn't as many people, there were still people. We need to move past partisan politics to deal with the climate change. We must work towards the emissions targets of climate scientists and those set out in the Paris Agreement. We must meet the target of 60% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions below 2005 levels by 2030 and net zero by 2050. These targets need to be put into legislation. The Green Party would maintain a broad-based, revenue-neutral carbon fee on all sources of carbon dioxide pollution, with dividends being returned to Canadians. We don't need any new fossil fuel projects. We must cancel the Trans Mountain Pipeline and end fossil fuel subsidies, including those to LNG. We don't need any more fracking, and we need to remove fossil fuels from our electricity grid by 2030. This means plugging into an electrical vehicle grid. So if anyone here in Corner Brook would like to put in a charging station, as well as by 2030 banning the sale of combustion engines, and completing a national building retrofit by 2030 for buildings to be net zero. All of these tasks will take workers who will be transitioning away from the oil and gas industry. The only way we're going to do all of this is through a cross-party inter-cabinet of all parties working together. Thank you.
And 3 minutes to you, Holly.
Okay, thank you. Our targets for greenhouse gas emissions reduction have to be based on the best science available. They have to be tough, and they have to be audited. The NDP has a $15 billion climate change plan that confronts the climate crisis, limits warming to 1.5 degrees, and creates 300,000 good new jobs within its first mandate. We'll keep carbon pricing and the rebates to families. We'll stop subsidies to the fossil fuel industries, as you say. That's about a $3.3 billion saving that we can use to fund our priorities. We'll create an independent climate accountability office to monitor our progress towards our climate goals, and we'll legislate the targets. An NDP government will move federal government vehicles to electric by 2025, the entire fleet, using Made in Canada vehicles wherever that's possible, because that will support businesses that fight climate change and support manufacturing jobs in Canada as we move to the production of zero emissions vehicles. We'll work to electrify public transit by 2030, but we'll also help families afford zero emission vehicles through generous tax credits that grow if you buy a vehicle made in Canada, up to $15,000 per family. This also helps ensure those good manufacturing jobs, and it helps will also help families install those charging stations that we'll need at home, and will also invest to expand charging station infrastructure across the country so that those zero-emission vehicles become practical. We also have a building retrofit program. Homeowners will be able to access no-interest loans to undertake energy efficiency projects in their homes. And this will also lower emissions and make homes more comfortable, and will create thousands of jobs in skilled trades and supporting industries, as well as saving families money on what they spend on energy. And we'll make sure that Indigenous people are full and equal partners in every effort to confront the climate crisis by giving Indigenous leadership a seat at the table for discussions of all these climate initiatives. Thank you.
And thank you to the both of you for your answer to the first 4 questions. Those were the questions laid out by the National Organizing Committee. For the second half of our 8 questions, leading up to this debate, we asked for input from the general public on what questions you would like to see asked. When those questions were compiled and discussed with the local organizing committee, and we came up with an additional 4 questions, which have more of a local feel to them. We appreciate all the involvement of people who have submitted those questions. And the first one is in regards to oil and gas. In the past year, 3 oil spills have released over 250,000 liters of oil into the oceans around our province. In addition to oil spills, the seismic blasts used in offshore exploration have raised environmental concerns over their effect on ocean life. What will you do to ensure that current oil production is pursued in a safe and environmentally responsible manner? And just as importantly, how will you approach potential new exploration and development proposals given concerns over the sustainability of further fossil fuel extraction? And this one goes to you first, Holly.
Okay. It's important that we move our economy from non-renewable energy resources to zero-emissions sustainable resources. I've heard the Premier say that Newfoundland's and Labrador's offshore production is relatively clean, but it's still fossil fuel production, and any oil spill is too big an oil spill. Stringently enforced environmental protection laws are the best guarantee of responsible development, or, well, continued development in the offshore, and the NDP is committed to protecting our oceans. And since we're committed to moving to zero-emissions vehicles and clean energy, in federal government activities and the creation of a clean energy corridor across the country, our real interest is in other forms of energy. Excuse me. Our plan is naturally to lessen our dependence and use of oil and gas, obviously. However, we've always been on the side of energy workers, and our New Deal ensures that the transition to a low-carbon economy will be a just transition. So workers currently in the energy sector will continue to power our communities long into the future. By reinvesting the billions given away to fossil fuel companies into new green jobs in renewable energy and green technology, we can ensure that workers have the training and support they need to thrive in the low-carbon economy that we hope to develop.
Thank you. And next to you, Lucas, for 3 minutes on oil and gas.
So definitely there's no doubt, as a province, we're heavily tied to the oil and gas industry. But as the rest of the world moves away from fossil fuels, we must too before we get left behind. As for the oil currently being produced, we need an independent oil and gas regulator to ensure the safety and environmental responsibility of the production. As Holly mentioned, and as I'm sure most of you have heard, that the offshore oil is cleaner than that of the tar sands. This puts us in a pretty good position to move off of oil as we move away from fossil fuels, and we can use our oil versus that of Alberta. This process must include a just transition for workers, and we should not be entering any new exploration and development proposals as well as we must stop fracking within our country. The Green Party proposes to build an east to west energy grid to allow renewable electricity to flow across the provinces and territories. Some of the transitional jobs could be in these renewable energies like wind, which we know we have a bit of here. And this would play into the grid for electric vehicles. The Green Party also proposes requiring all passenger ferries to be electric or hybrid by 2030, which could help bring the cost down of Marine Atlantic, as we're no longer relying on a fluctuating commodity like oil to power the boats. These are some of the ways in which the Green Party wants to keep oil and gas safe while we're producing it and move away from it in the future.
Our next question is on food security. Food security and sustainability has increasingly become an important topic across the country and in our province. In May of this year, the federal government released the first ever national food policy for Canada. In recent years, our provincial government has committed to increasing commercial agricultural production in Newfoundland and Labrador in an effort to improve food security. How would you and your government work with both provincial and municipal governments, as well as other stakeholders, to ensure the environmental sustainability of our food system? To you first, Lucas.
Yeah, it's a really great question. And while I've been campaigning over these last few weeks, specifically up the Northern Peninsula, I love driving along the highway and seeing all the beautiful gardens. And it always sort of made me wonder, what did we do before the ferry? And so I've asked a few people in the community their ways in which they sustain themselves. And a lot of it is, salt fish and vegetables, and not a can of Vienna sausages. So the Green Party proposes to plan to invest in local food production, such as canneries and slaughterhouses for local meat to be butchered, which will not only help our environmental footprint, but also our local economy. We need to protect supply management systems while allowing production for local markets outside of these systems. The Green Party would move towards regenerative agriculture practices to reduce the erosion created by farming, as well as moving towards closed containment systems for aquaculture to protect our food as well as our oceans. The Green Party proposes to invest $2.5 million a year into a land and quota trust program and farming apprenticeship programs. We must also set a target to replace a third of Canada's food imports with domestic production. Through all of these different things, we are promoting sustainability within our food systems.
And now we'll go to Holly for your thoughts on the environmental sustainability of our food system.
Thank you. Since the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change identified food shortages as one of the problems to be caused by climate change, food security has been a more prominent concern than it used to be. And locally, of course, we hear of empty supermarket shelves whenever the ferry from North Sydney is unable to sail. It seems to happen more frequently as weather gets worse and their predictions of wind get more regular. So the NDP believes that connecting local consumers and producers so that produce doesn't need to be shipped halfway across the country is key to food security and to sustainability. Our Canadian food strategy will address regional needs and priorities by investing in agricultural communities and supporting young and new farmers in particular. We'll protect the supply management system and defend Canadian agricultural products when they're being exported. For new and young farmers, we'll work with the provinces to make sure that suitable training is available and provide low-cost startup loans. We'll also make sure that transfers of family farms aren't unfairly taxed. It's important that we ensure access to high-speed internet in rural and remote areas too, so that farmers, amongst other groups, but farmers in particular, can readily connect with the people they need to have contact with in order to get their supplies, to get their products to market, to access the best information that's available. Too often in remote areas, the internet connection is inadequate if it exists at all. To ensure the environmental sustainability of our food system, the NDP will invest in public agricultural research and data collection to make sure our farmers are on the cutting edge of knowledge and innovation. Developing agricultural science, this is something you know about, Lucas. Developing agricultural science is the best method both to ensure that we have food security through the regional production of crops suited to our climate and to ensure that crop production is environmentally safe and sustainable. We need to be continually looking ahead to be ready to adapt.
And thank you for that. The next question submitted by the public for this event deals with oceans. There are many threats to our ocean ecosystems, including ocean warming and acidification due to climate change, overfishing, as well as risks from offshore oil production. As a coastal province, we are particularly vulnerable to impacts on our oceans. Our culture and way of life, as well as economic sectors, such as fisheries and tourism, are highly dependent on a healthy ocean. Given the risks to our ocean ecosystems, what actions will you take to protect them? And we'll be going to Holly first.
Thanks. The importance of the ocean in the Newfoundland and Labrador economy and culture really can't be overstated. New Democrats are committed to protecting at least 30% of our land, fresh waters, and oceans by 2030. Protection that, as I think I mentioned before, will be backed by funding and enforcement. We're all too familiar with the coastline strewn with plastic waste, so we will ban the single-use plastics that too often end up in our oceans. We will put in place a $40 million coastal protection fund that will be used to clean up the coasts and rehabilitate fish habitats. And we'll also protect ocean biodiversity by expanding well-enforced marine protected areas. Our plan to meet stringent targets on greenhouse gas emissions will help to prevent further ocean acidification, which in turn will help to protect ocean species, particularly corals. Coastal cleanup efforts will help reverse the loss of coastal blue carbon ecosystems, such as salt marshes, which are important not only for their efficient carbon sequestration, but also are an important habitat for plants, animals, and birds, and therefore are key to maintaining species diversity. To reduce continuing damage, we'll strengthen our response to oil spills and derelict vessels and mandate reduced emissions from shipping and fishing activities. To prepare for changes and respond as effectively as possible, we'll invest in research, in ocean science and technology, and also improve the Coast Guard equipment and training so that they're able to do their jobs as efficiently and effectively as possible.
Thank you, Holly. Go ahead, Lucas.
So we must turn off the pollution taps flowing into our coastal waters, including those of municipal sewage and industrial effluents. We must expand our protected areas to 30%, kind of like Holly mentioned, of Canada's territorial waters by 2030. We see a good number of cruise ships throughout our riding, not just in Corner Brook, but up in St. Anthony and everywhere in between. And we propose legislation to deal with cruise ship water waste discharge. By 2021, the Green Party would implement an extended producer responsibility program for companies making and selling synthetic fishing gear to fund the retrieval of lost and abandoned gear, also known as ghost nets. We need to increase federal funding to departments to ramp up development of endangered species recovery plans. As well, the Green Party would commit $100 million annually over the next 4 years to create Indigenous-led protected areas, and increase funding to research on fish stocks to improve management so that we don't see a collapse. By 2021, I should have said this earlier, by 2021, we'll also fund proper solid waste management systems so that we aren't putting all of that waste into the ocean. All of these things are what is going to protect our oceans for ourselves and future generations.
Thank you, Lucas. We're approaching the final question of our debate with all of the wild cards still in play. So I'm very excited for all the vigorous back and forth that's about to happen. Our final question is with respect to plastics and waste. An important conversation has begun across Canada and in our province about waste, in particular regarding single-use plastics. Excessive plastic has become a huge problem around the world, both in terms of resource use and in pollution. What do you think should be done to curb plastic waste and to clean up the enormous amounts of plastic garbage that already exist? To Lucas first.
It's very sad walking along a beach or a trail and seeing waste or plastic just sitting there. The Green Party proposes to implement an extended producer responsibility program, sort of like the one for the ghost nets, to hold manufacturers financially responsible for the waste that they generate. Moving forward, that we should require all products to be fully recyclable using readily available processes. And we must deal with our own waste and phase out the export of solid waste to other countries. The Green Party proposes a plastic life cycle advisory board with people from all sectors within the life cycle of plastic, as well as all levels of government. By 2022, the Green Party will ban the production, distribution, and sale of all unnecessary or non-essential petroleum-based single-use plastics, such as bags, straws, balloons, utensils, cigarette filters, all of that, etc. The Green Party recommends extending the ban on microbeads to include household and industrial cleaning products, as well as by 2021 requiring all new washing machines sold in Canada to have a removable, cleanable filter to capture microfibers. These are all ways in which the Green Party proposes minimizing the amount of plastic waste that we create.
Thank you. And you'll have the last word on that one, Holly.
Thank you. Well, some businesses and communities, as we know, have already made moves on the problem of excessive plastic by no longer providing plastic bags or plastic straws, or by banning other kinds of single-use plastics. This is a start, and it encourages us all to be more mindful of our bad habits, which is also part of curbing plastic waste. If we don't want the stuff, then there's no reason for anyone to produce it. The NDP will eliminate single-use plastics by 2022 and hold companies responsible for the entire life cycle of their plastic products and packaging, because without consistent regulations on packaging that will force manufacturers to deal with the waste created by their own products, we can't hope to achieve zero waste or even low waste. We'll help municipalities improve waste management and recycling programs and work consistently towards a zero waste future. We'll work with the municipalities and Indigenous groups and provincial governments to clean up existing plastic waste in our communities, recycling that waste wherever it is possible to do so. A concerted effort coordinated between all levels of government is the only effective way to address the proliferation of plastic in our environment, and that's what we'll be undertaking.
And with that, we'll be moving into concluding remarks from our candidates. We will go with Holly first, and Lucas will get the final word as far as concluding remarks go. You'll each get 3 minutes.
All right. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Lucas, for the opportunity to compare our ideas, and thank you to the sponsors of the event. I know that if you took the time to come here this evening, it's because you're concerned about the issues we've discussed: clean water, persistent pollutants, wilderness preservation, agriculture, and the impact our activities have on the environment. You came because you know that our current path is not sustainable, and you are already making personal choices to reduce the environmental impact of your home and your work life. We all know that without changes in policy so that we are required as a country to meet or exceed targets for greenhouse gas reductions, for development of zero-emission power generation and technologies, and for protection and remediation of our waters, our wilderness, and our air, our children and grandchildren, and I'll have them a lot sooner than you do, Lucas, will face struggles that we can barely imagine now. Soil erosion, flooding, storm events, contaminated water, and temperature changes will make every social and economic activity more difficult and less secure. The environmental policies Lucas and I have presented here tonight have a lot in common. And I think that we can't consider these policies outside of the more general issues of fairness and equality. As industries change to meet the climate crisis, we need to make sure that no Canadian is left without access to support systems like EI, without access to education or retraining, or without health care or healthy food. The NDP plan improves our support systems while making the changes we need to combat climate change so that all Canadians can be sure that they will be able to provide for their families in an equitable society and a safe, secure, and healthy environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. And Lucas, your final remarks when you're ready.
That was really well said. And I'm more of a straight to the point kind of person, so I don't have all of those nice words. But that was beautifully said. Thank you to all of the organizers, and again, everybody for showing up. By participating in this debate, you're participating in the democratic process, and that's something that we should applaud. Next time you're having a conversation with other candidates who might not be here today, other politicians, or even family and friends, ask them the questions that we were asking today. Ask them what they're doing to be part of the solution. Throughout this campaign so far, I've learned a lot, and so much about different local organizations and individual actions that people are taking. Now we just need the political change. So while I'm asking everyone to do something about climate change, I would also ask that on October 21st, you consider voting Lucas Nell for the Green Party in the Long Range Mountain. Thank you. Mountains.
Thank you, Lucas. Those were the 8 questions we came here to ask tonight. I know that there are almost certainly more questions that remain out there. So I do encourage you to write your candidates, write your local representatives, and continue to pressure them on environmental issues so that they are clear that it's very important to you. I don't know if our participants are sticking around after the event tonight, but I feel confident that you can find them somewhere and discuss with them some of the things that they brought up tonight between now and Election Day. So once again, thank you to the candidates, to all of you for coming out here this evening, and everybody who's joining us online via Rogers and the other media participants that we have here tonight. Our partner, the Environmental Policy Institute, along with the Western Environment Centre, is very happy to have hosted this event this evening. I urge you all to get involved in your own communities. Write your local environmental nonprofit groups, see what they're doing. If you can't find one in your community, start one yourselves. Trust me, it's not that hard. Lastly, the most important thing I want to stress to everybody is the importance of going out there and voting, and drag 3 or 4 friends with you when you do it. Advanced voting is taking place on Friday, October 11th. It runs through Monday, October 14th. And the official voting day is Monday, October 21st. And if you'll join me in applauding our candidates for being brave enough to come out here tonight. Thank you.
The next time you do it.
Right.
Fantastic. Yes, it didn't come to blows.
Get to do the wild card thing because we had much of
I know a lot of things. I was like, wow.